This is double corruption from Atlas, +3 levels to mob bosses. Flicker Strike is one-shotting everything with relatively cheap gear. I've decided to not use uniques, not using neck anointments. The only good items were only if I have exalted them myself and they became good. And the rest has been bought with cheap searches that I will list down below, in hope that similar gear can be found by a lot of players rather than only few whales that can afford it. I've tried every permutation of the build. My brain was a little bit cooked, so I kept calling it Flicker Step during the video. Welcome to Goblin-Inc. I am Ace of Spades. I want to start by saying that I spent a lot of time testing every version of this build, both mine and of other content creators, and understanding the differences, and those are my takeaway. There are two parts of the video that I think are must watch, and I'm gonna put them back to back. The first one is how to play the build, which is gonna increase your damage by no less than 20 times and makes your game so much easier if you watch this first version. The second version is the most interesting one, I think, which is why I'm doing the things that I am doing compared to what other people are doing with their Flicker Step build, which are more like Tempest Flurry builds with a little bit of Flicker Step. So what you have to do and understand in this build is that there are only two components that are important to know. The first one is that this build has generators and spenders. So let's talk about our first generator. It is My Illusion. So this illusion might not feel powerful in the early game, but when you're playing on late game maps and the density of mobs increases, you're actually able to generate quite a bit of power charges extremely easily just by randomly dodging without you even realizing you're doing it. And this allows you to play without Tempest Flurry and allows you to spam Flicker Stack constantly. The second way we generate power charges is with Reaper's Invocation when we kill enemies. Now, this might look simple and on first sight, but it's important to understand one mechanic. The difference between Reaper's Invocation and Illusion is that Reaper's Invocation can be used during Flicker Step. Normally, let's take a look at Flicker Step, which is your main skill. Normally, to nerf Flicker Step, it is not possible to gain power charges during Flicker Step. Now, we can cast the Reaper's Invocation, which is a power generator, as you're gonna see later, during our Flicker Step. Not only once during it, but multiple times. So as we are Flicker Stepping, we'll be able to use Power Reaper's Invocation multiple times. I'm gonna now generate a bunch of power charges, and then show you guys how we have 7. And I'm going to use my Flicker Step next, and then I'm going to generate power charges while doing it. And now the power charges come fly back at us here. Those have been generated because during the animation of Flicker Step, I've been pressing my Reaper's Invocation. The cool thing about it is that those charges don't come back at you at the same time. They come to you at different intervals. They're flying. Meanwhile, they're flying to you, you can press your charge stuff, which is your second spender. There are two things that spend power charges in this build. The first one is the Flicker Step, and the second one is the most important buff, Charge Stuff, which empowers all your attacks. It costs power charges. Maximum, you can have 7 charges spent for this one. So what I do is that during my Flicker Step, I cast my Reaper's Invocation. When Flicker Step is over, I recharge my buff, because as you can see it's going down, it's 40 seconds left now. I recharge it with 1 or 2 power charges, and then the rest of the power charges that are being generated from Reaper's Invocation coming in, flying, those end up being used for my next Flicker Step. Usually what I also do is throw in 1 random dodge rolls, and this works incredibly well when there's a little bit of density. So if there's a little bit of density, you get those extra power charges, and man, the illusion gives you between 1 and 4 power charges. It's incredibly OP. Has a high chance of generating extra power charges, and I find it to be extremely helpful and powerful because the main reason why you die in this build is when you're not Flicker Stepping. If you're not Flicker Stepping, you're vulnerable to damage. When you're in Flicker Step, you rarely take any damage and you rarely ever need any kind of sustain or damage. This way also the build requires a lot less mana regeneration and things like that. Those are really the only things you need to know about how to play the build. Lastly, we're gonna finish off by talking about bossing for this build. For bossing in this build, I'm gonna use a clip and explain what's going on in this clip. So in this clip, what you're gonna be watching is that I start the boss with my power charges up, and I attack the boss enough times to get my combo points for the bell, then I use Tempest Bell, and then I one-shot the boss with my Flicker Staff. There is no tier 15 boss that I wasn't able to one-shot yet. My gear is fairly bad still at this point. And my bosses are actually quite buffed, because I don't know if you can see my atlas, but I have improved my bosses quite a bit. So my bosses are already leveled up, and those are T15 bosses. As you can see, I've already taken, improvements to my boss difficulty. It's +3 level to my bosses, and they still get one shot. And as you're gonna see later, my gear is fairly achievable by everyone. Minus my chest, which I had rolled like a dog. But
what the hell?
I only found it yesterday, so most of these clips, all of those clips, I've been taken without my huge chest. Now, let's talk about the rest of the build and the choices I've made and why. As you can see, this build is being played without any 6 links on purpose. I could buy them if I wanted to, and I could buy more expensive gear, but I've decided to make the build that I think people can achieve, and the only thing I've done is I have a really good chest because I found it and then I sold my shitty one. Let's go over the skills and the changes I've made compared to other people's builds. First of all, we're not going to use Tempest Fury. The reason why I don't use Tempest Fury is because we don't have enough skill slots, and because, frankly, we wouldn't really use it. The moment you're able to play with a Lingering Illusion, you have no need for Tempest Fury, and also you can do bosses without, and you can generate power charges on bosses even when there is no mobs for Reaper's Invocation. Reaper's Invocation is creating power charges for you with Profane Ritual. It casts Profane Ritual, and Profane Rituals generate extra power charges by eating corpses, which is not possible on bosses. We have increased the energy generation, perfusion for additional power charge, and energy retention for a little bit more energy gain from it, but no big deal. We are using a basic quarterstaff ability, which is quite okay to kill the first few mobs and start of the dungeon. And at the start of the dungeon, you can then generate your power charges with Reaper's Invocation. So this is what the one main change is, that I'm using this with Practiced Combo, Martial Tempo, and Overpower. The reason why I'm using Practiced Combo is because on bosses, all I really want to do is get to my Tempest Bell for 4 combo points, cast my Tempest Bell, and go boom. My Tempest Bell has Rage on it, Magnified Effect for more area, and has Hourglass for more damage. The reason why I have Magnified Effect is because I find that some bosses exceed the range of the bell. There is a couple of weird bosses that either move around or are out of the map, the big boss in Act 2, and I couldn't hit him with the Tempest Bell without it. There are some things that reduce the overall DPS of the build, but because the build does so much damage that even with no optimal gear, I can still one-shot tier 15 bosses, I have a little bit more utility. And you're gonna see that for lower maps and anything else, the damage will be fine. So this extra area, the quality of life, does not influence your boss DPS in the least. One Flicker Step is all you're gonna need. For my Flicker Step, I have Close Combat, Perpetual Charge, I have Momentum, and I have Concentrated Effect. All those are damage multipliers. Flicker Step will not do any elemental damage by default. This is actually not good. So the weapon that we need to have is going to be an elemental weapon. My weapon is not correct for this build. It's a physical damage weapon. And you want to do more elemental damage because we have a buff that gives us 50% more, 50% increased lightning damage while we have a herald. So we're not benefiting from that with our Flicker Step. If we take a look at Flicker Step, our lightning damage is only a small portion of it. So we want to increase this one. And this is because my weapon has some lightning damage on it. Lingering Illusion, very simple. Actually getting 20 quality on this one would be really good. You get 1 extra power charge. It's a really strong skill. For my Tempest Bell, we already talked about it. I like the Rage. Rage gives you... It's a buff whenever you get Rage. up to 30 rage, you're gonna get more damage. It's a damage multiplier for you. And it's sweet to have on your belt because you hit it really quickly. Now, for my charge stuff, I have done some changes compared to other people. We still run persistence. We run overcharge. We run conduction. I think this is an important combination. And I run lightning infusion, which is really not necessary. The reason why I don't run energy shield leech or other things like that is because I find it that a lot of times you're not killing things with your charge stuff, and you're really not generating a lot of energy shield from it. But if you want to have a little bit of sustain, you can go for siphoning on it. On Reaper's Invocation, I already talked about it. On Wind Dance, we have Pin, Wind Wave, and Lockdown. It does quite a bit of damage, and it will generate quite a bit of kills by default. This is maybe the most important skill that you have. The extra evasion you get is incredibly important, as you're gonna see later. Evasion is the most important stat for this build, and we're gonna go over why later in a second. I cannot stress enough how important it is to have Wind Dancer. In fact, you could play without Herald of Thunder, it wouldn't be a problem. We have Infernal Cry. In fact, I might suggest to play without the Herald of Thunder and play with Grim Fist instead, because your damage is still so high, you really don't need it very much. So Infernal Cry is something that I'm gonna add to the build for people that do not have as much extra spirit as I have. If we take away Cannibalism, which is 15 spirit consumption, I have 60 extra spirit. If I wanted to run my ideal setup, instead of Infernal Cry, which we're gonna talk in a second why I'm using that instead of Mantra of Destruction, I would use Grim Fist. Grim Fist will make you incredibly tanky, and it could be used instead of Herald of Thunder if you want to be more tanky, and it will be fine. I still think you have to keep Ghost Dance, and you need to keep Wind Dancer. I will say that Grim Fist and Herald of Thunder, they could be exchanged. Grim Fist is incredibly strong at giving you extra energy, and quality on it is really good. Now, at this point, I would have 30 spirit not spent in this build, which means that you could have a worse chest than I have and still get enough spirit. We generate spirit through our chest because of a passive we're gonna take later on for the invoker. Now, if you want to run this build with 60 less spirit, you're gonna run without Grim Fist, and you're gonna run without Cannibalism, which is 15 spirit consumption as well. If you really want, you can take out even the Herald of Thunder. And at this point, you can run this build with 91 less spirit than I have. So at that point, you will only need 50 spirit from your chest, which is incredibly low to have. So I think this is going to be very achievable. We're going to prioritize a chest with energy shield and evasion, and without other stats for the build. The reason why we're running Infernal Cry instead of Mantra of Destruction is because Mantra of Destruction requires you to use 8 combos before you can use it, and we do not generate a lot of combo points with Flicker Step. We do generate enough combo points easily on bosses with our basic attack to cast the Bell. The Bell is only 4 combo points. Mantra of Destruction, even with quality, is still 8 combo points, and likely you're not going to be able to hit it consistently. Mantra of Destruction converts your 40% of your damage to chaos damage. And that's okay, because chaos damage bypasses resistances, but you have to remember that we're going to bypass resistances regardless. And because it's converting also our lightning damage, we are missing out on some lightning damage bonus when we use Mantra of Destruction. But at the same time, it does have the buff of Purple Flame of Charyula, which grants us more damage as extra chaos damage, and extra means that it's on top of the base. Meanwhile, the base one, 40% here, is not on top of the base. It's just converting some of your damage. Now, the reason why this is not ideal is because this does not work on bosses. You're not going to have your buff, Purple Flame of Charyula, on bosses, and the damage on trash is so much overkill that you really don't care about it. Why I'm running Infernal Cry is because Infernal Cry will convert damage to fire damage. So it's going to convert your physical damage into elemental damage. And this is going to be beneficial to us as because of a talent we have, we can bypass elemental resistances when we crit. So it's gonna convert part of your Flicker Strike physical damage into fire damage, and with quality you get 50% more fire damage from it. So quality is actually pretty sweet on Infernal Crime. With it, we run Premeditation and we run Murderous Intent, as most people are doing in their Mantra of Destruction. Also, Infernal Cry can be used without generating power charges, meaning that right now you can use it whenever you want and it goes on cooldown. It's only a 2-link, it doesn't even need 3-link. You can run cooldown reduction on it with a 3-link. I'm gonna put it in the guide. What you're gonna do with it is that it gives you 2 buffs to your skill. It empowers 15% more damage to your Flicker Step and also adds Cooling Strike to it. Again, I am so much overkill in damage that I run without it, and I'm running Grim Fist instead for more defense. But if you do not have the Spirit, it's sweet to have. It's a lot of extra damage, and yeah, it's powerful. I think Spirit is really the bottleneck of this build. What is mandatory to have, like I said, is Wind Dancer, the Ghost Dance, and the Lingering Illusion. So you need 90 Spirit for that. Sorry, 120. Is it 120? Yeah, 120. But you get 100 from the base game, and then you need a little bit more after that. So I think it's pretty reasonable. 150 with Herald of Thunder, it's great. So those are my reasoning for running this. Then Herald of Thunder, I have a +1 level, I have Blind, and I have Innervate. Whenever you kill a shocked enemy, attacks gain 35% of damage as lightning damage. The reason why I'm not running this on the charge stuff is because on bosses, where damage really is the only place that matters, you're not gonna get that buff on bosses because you're not gonna kill anything. For that reason, I'm running 25% lightning infusion on it instead. For the Ghost Dance, we have Fast Forward, and if you can afford it, to run Cannibalism. 4% life recovered on kill. Now, most people are telling you to run both Mana Leech and Life Leech on this build. I found it that it honestly really does not matter to run Life Leech, and I would only suggest run 1 Mana Leech so that you can make your Flicker Step a little bit easier to use. And of course, that's, in my opinion, fine. We are going to be tanking most of the damage from our Energy Shield, and because we are in Flicker Step so much, Ghost Dance and Wind Dancer are going to refresh their buffs during the Flicker Step. So most of our generation of effective pool of life is going to be from the ES, from the Ghost Dance. Let's take a look at the gear. Now, this stuff is not ideal. It is physical damage with a little bit of lightning damage on it, and I think elemental stuff is gonna be the best way to go about it, because again, we get 50% increased lightning damage from buff we get on our talents for that. I'm gonna leave a link down below to listings, automatic search for all pieces of gear that you can find for quite cheap. So this one was pretty cheap, was only a couple of X. This one is a beast, and I bought it with only maximum life and 1 rest, and then I exalted it twice and I got 2 more rests out of it. So what I suggest to do a lot of times is to buy items with missing stats and finish exalting, and buy them for 1 exalt and then try your luck. Same thing for my amulet. I did not anoint it, but I did exalt it. See, I don't get life a lot, and life is expensive. What I do is I get my resistances and I cap my resistances. Most important stats for this build is evasion and resistances. So I don't try to get damage on my items, so I simply go for resistances. And I have 1 Mana Leech on this ring. Fire Lightning and Chaos Resistance implicit. My boots, again, I bought them for cheap, and I slammed 2 more resistances on it. Those are pretty sweet boots, not gonna lie. My belt is mid. This is a couple of exalt, even if you buy it already like this. Maybe 1 right now. My gloves, because gloves have low energy shield and evasion value compared to other items like the helm or the chest, I think it's worth to not go for high energy shield on evasion on them and just get something that has the good stats you want. So for this one, it had the life leech I wanted, which I don't want anymore. And it has the lightning resistances and max life. You don't need to care about ES and evasion here. You don't need to care about the physical damage. Only get max life and resistances on your gloves. That's really all you have to care about. Make sure that one between your rings or your gloves have mana leech on it, and that's fine. My chest, I slammed it twice and I got the chaos ras and the dexterity on it. I found it myself. I'll show you the video of me finding it and slamming it. It was quite funny. But all I want you guys to get on the chest is gonna be enough evasion and ES. No max life, no resistances. You don't care about it. You just go full ES and evasion on it. You save as much money as you can, and that is gonna give you the most spirit, which is what we're gonna talk about next for the build. We're gonna talk about the talents, and I'm gonna tell you guys what I run and why, and what I've changed from what other people's run. So this build can be done actually quite low level. The low level of the version, which is I'm gonna link as well, it's gonna be done without crit and crit chance. When you play with crit and you have enough crit chance, you're gonna bypass all the elemental resistances, and that's great. And when you don't, you're not gonna bypass them, and you're gonna save so many points. You're gonna save so many clusters, and you're gonna be able to run this build as low level. What is important in this build, and I cannot stress enough how important this is to get to protect me from harm. What kills me the most in this build was big physical slam, actually. But because we go to 75% evasion, at this point you're gonna have about almost 9,000 evasion rating, which will translate in 67% estimated physical damage reduction because of and protect me from harm. It might seem overkill. Some people think it's overkill, but I can tell you from experience that physical damage and big physical hits, which are hard to mitigate with armor, is something that I think uniquely Monk can do well, because evasion will scale both your armor and your, well, evasion. So it's an incredibly powerful stat, especially when we have nodes like this that get both evasion, which is also armor, and energy shield. So we get 3 things for once from them. In my basic low level build, which can be played at lower level, we are not going to be taking the crit nodes. And what we're going to be taking is I'm going to be taking more evasion from you guys instead, because you're going to have lower level of gear. Evasion, evasion, evasion. Getting all those evasion nodes here, getting the evasion here, it's super important, as it is maybe your best stats to have. What is important to take is, so we're going to be skipping all those critical hit chance nodes. And we're also going to be skipping the extra jewel slot, because you probably guys are not going to have good jewels. Which also, by the way, you can get jewels worth 30-40x for only a couple of x. I'm going to leave you also a link to the order I got for jewels, so you can get that as well. What's important to get is the power charges nodes, the energy generation node, which gives you 45% damage, which is very sweet. All the evasion. You want to get the staffs. You want to get to the attack speed here, the 50% lightning damage from the herald. And now I'm going to show you what I would remove and change. This one honestly is not really needed, the 2 melee range and the extra jewel. This is what I'm going to do respec, and I'm going to show you guys, if I were to run this on a budget of levels, I'm going to show you how many talents you can save and run this build safely. Wow. I'm gonna remove all this. Did I remove that? Did I come back? Okay, I came back. I think it's gonna be about 30-40 points we can save. How many have saved now? 20. And still more to go. 24. Now, what are we gonna take instead of those points? This is also, well, this you can take because you crit a little bit. And there we are. we're gonna take more, like 33 points saved, which means that I'm now level 87. You remove 33 points from this, which means 54. So at 54, you should be able to have everything you need for the build to function. I would say that when you can get those extra points here, you get more extra evasion, evasion, to compensate for having worse gear. Then you're gonna be fine. And we're gonna even be able to get some elemental damage extra. And we're gonna get a little bit of attack speed here to compensate from the lack of attack speed on gear and on jewels. And I think at this point, 23 points, this point is gonna be level 64, and you're gonna have pretty filled up build going on. That's gonna be for the lower level of the build. I'm gonna leave 2 planners down below with the 2 different setup. I would say this is almost complete. 87. 3 more points. At 90, I would have exactly everything that I think is really high value, and after that, I'm gonna get a little bit more evasion. I really don't need damage, so defense is really all you need for this build. My build is quite low on HP and everything because, well, I've kept all my money. I'm not gonna buy 6 links, and my gear, frankly, is not upgraded in quality, as you can see. Only my stuff and a little bit of my helm, my chest, of course. And that's is to keep my gear reasonable, besides my chest being a beast. And I got lucky with my Amulet slams. But I'm keeping my money, and I'm just gonna try different builds and try to build builds that are reasonable for people to play, and they can clear all the end game with it. If you guys enjoyed the video and the breakdown, let me know, guys, what you think.